guys, welcome to the Canadian Spartan Ambassador Podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Amber.
And I'm Jill, and we are ready to take you through some Canadian Spartan content. We are so excited to bring this podcast to you where we will discuss lots of topics Spartan Race Canada.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay connected for all our exciting episodes to come. All right, welcome back, listeners. We are coming at you from the Canadian Spartan Ambassador Podcast. And like always, we've got a fabulous guest on here tonight. And we are going to be talking about the Obstacle Specialist course that's going to be happening this weekend in Calabogie, say that 10 times fast. And we're also going to touch on some other, educational things you can lean into as a Spartan racer, as a trainer, such as the SGX course. So we've got Sandy Ostler on here with us tonight, and she is our Obstacle Specialist course trainer that's going to be on site with us on Friday in Calabogie. So welcome, Sandy.
Welcome, Sandy.
Thank you.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm actually Sandy Ostler. I actually own So Fitness. I actually started out training actually during COVID of all times. This is my semi-retirement, quote unquote. Basically what I did is I left corporate world and everybody's like, why don't you train people? You're just a natural at it. You've always wanted to do it. So during COVID, I finally had time and I went for it. And during COVID, it kind of reintroduced obstacles to me again. Obviously with COVID, there was no races for a couple years and got back into that passion again. And where I was working at the time had a perfect setup for creating obstacles and was researching and everything and looked at Spartan. And I'm like, oh my gosh, they've got a course for this. I got to get that certification. And that's kind of how I got into the Spartan SGX world. And that kind of led into the obstacle specialist component of it, because I didn't even know there were courses available. Now, at the time when I actually joined Spartan SGX Coaches and did my certification, it didn't exist up here in Canada. So again, with my corporate world, I was used to being the only Canadian on call or very few. So of course, being the newbie, I was like, what about Canada? What about Canada? So that caught their attention. And they approached me and said, hey, would you be interested in doing some obstacle specialists courses for us at the events? And I'm like, well, yes. This was like totally awesome. So we ended up doing one at Blue Mountain a couple years ago. So it'll be 3 years now. And it was a big hit. So that was the first one that we did in Eastern Canada. One had been tried out in the West Coast with Stacey Rose. And basically we're the two SGX coaches that are doing this course across Canada. So she does the West Coast, I do the East Coast, and it kind of spearheaded from there. So basically we're just kind of trying to grow a lot of what's already being done in the States up here in Canada. You know, obviously we're a little bit of a smaller market. We've got a little bit less races, but we want to be able to offer the same thing out there to new people coming to the sport, to existing people, to even the elite out there, and be able to offer this up here in Canada, which we're now in the 3rd season of offering this course. And it's been a hit. It's been great.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
That's awesome.
So for that course, it's called the Obstacle Specialist course. You will probably hear us referring to it as the OS course or something to that effect. But if I am a new racer, is this something that I'm looking to do, or is this more for advanced people? What would you say are the type of people that come to this course mostly?
Excellent question. It's actually a mix. I'd say probably half the people were newer or had run maybe 1 or 2 races. Got pulled in by one of their friends saying, you got to try this out. And then they're like, oh my gosh, that was a lot harder than I expected. Then they would go a second and go, hey, I could do this, but I did it the hard way. I know there's got to be an easier way. So I've kind of got half the group that's about that. But I also get some seasoned people too that want to get a little bit more practice. Because I mean, let's get real here. We're not going to find a twister in a gym out there. We're not going to find the stairway obstacle either. So a lot of the obstacles are not available out there. So it also gives the people that have a little bit more experience an opportunity to really practice and hone their skills on the obstacles that are really not available. Yes, you could find ropes, you could find rings, you could find those types of things at various gyms out there, or some variations of it. But the ones that are very specific to Spartan, you don't get that exposure. So that's why it kind of balances out both. Really, the goal is you're either going to learn the form and technique, and you're getting that right from the very beginning. But my big thing is about learn to work smarter, not harder, because it's a long race, right? You're doing hills, you're doing this. So why waste the energy? So even if you've done multiple races, you're always going to learn something new. So no matter what your fitness level is, like my last course, I had somebody that was 64 years old in my course, and he killed it.
Wow.
Right? And I was just like, this is what this is about. So I would say it's probably a 50-50 split right now, which is nice because it really is meant for all levels.
Mm-hmm.
So when you do it, is it always the 5K course? Because the obstacles are different from the 5 to the 10 to the beast. So just out of curiosity for some of our listeners, is it always the 5K, or are you able to somehow mix in some of the super obstacles as well?
I totally mix it in because the obstacles that really people don't have a lot of exposure to are really more in the super and up. Sprint are like pretty basic, pretty straightforward. They might move one or two in and out, but I do try to get as many obstacles in as possible. And it also, but honestly, it depends on the terrain. Like some of the terrains are a little bit easier to get the obstacles because how they're set up. Obstacles have to be in certain areas because you got to be leveled and this and that. And depending on where you're at, the resort or wherever it is that we're doing it may not allow certain obstacles to be put in certain areas. So when Nick creates all of this and when the team pulls all of this together, you know, you might have obstacles that are like way out. Well, we might not do that one, or we decide as a team, hey, do we still have the energy? Because it's probably about, you know, a kilometer away. Do we want to do it or not? And then we kind of make a team decision that way. But the goal is really to go through as many obstacles as possible.
And which ones give people the most, what are people looking at? Like when they come to you, they get to the course, is there an obstacle where they're like, we have to hit this one?
Yeah, the rope is a big one. Believe it or not, the rope is still a big thing,
Sure.
especially I find for the women, because everybody thinks it's all brute strength, and it really isn't. It's all about technique. And the big thing that I do in the course is I don't show just one way of doing something, because my way may not be your way, Jill. And, you know, Amber, you may prefer doing it another way. So I try to show multiple ways of doing things. So the rope is always a big thing, especially since last year when it's not touching the ground anymore. That's a big deal for people that are a little bit shorter, right? Because now pulling up their leg, all of a sudden I have to think of a better way to get my legs up so I can wrap that rope underneath. So it kind of changed things up. So the rope kind of came back to the forefront. The Olympus wall is another big one.
Yeah, I was waiting for you to say that.
Right? So I created one on my my obstacle course that I do at my gym, but last year at Blue Mountain, when they changed it to a little bit of a slick surface and not the wood, remember that, Jill?
Yes.
Boy, did that change, because we actually had our room at Blue Mountain right by there, the Twister and the Olympus, and the amount of people that usually would be able to do it bombed. And it was just because of the surface. So again, I always try to train people to don't depend on the surface being wood or being this or being that, because they could change it on you. So I always tell them, prepare for the worst. So meaning always have a backup way of doing an obstacle. For example, the 6-foot wall, the Olympus. Try different ways. Yes, you're always going to have a preference with one way, but what if it's muddy that day? What if it's raining that day? Don't count on speed. Don't count on being able to jump. So I always try to kind of train them to be prepared doing it different ways. So then that way, that should not become a factor and you'll be able to do it, right? So I would say
so true.
Right? Isn't it?
I found for Olympus, especially because it's not my I wouldn't say it's my best. And I do, if it's wet or slippery, it's almost a no-go for me, but I've nailed it many different times in different ways. So I don't have a technique that I'm like, woohoo, this is great, I'm going to use it every time. Somehow I get up there every time and I'm like, just basically winging it again and just holding on
funny
for strength. Yeah.
I'm the opposite. I do it the exact same every time. There's one way that works for me. And if I try it a different way, it doesn't happen.
And you nail it every time. So maybe that's the best way is to come to the course, check out all the different strategies, because I've tried every grip now on that darn thing. I think my most comfortable now, and Amber, I want you to explain your technique after, and then Sandy, tell me which one you use, because maybe it'll help me, but I'm sure it'll help everybody else as well. But my best technique right now is just to grab anything and then just try to get my feet over to the other side and then move again. So I'm basically grabbing here, moving my feet further, and then grabbing again. Yeah. It's like a bunny hop technique.
Exactly.
I'll be honest, I learned my technique, shout out to Tyler Krashensky, because after I did Calabogie last year, actually, and he's a Brantfordite, he lives in Brantford, so we connect all the time, and he asked me, what did you fail? And I was like, honestly, the only one I failed was Olympus. And he asked me, well, what did you hang on to? And I was like, I don't know, literally, like Jill said, whatever I could grab.
Whatever.
And he kind of chuckled, and he actually recommended to me, he said, only use the holes.
I've heard that.
And yes, so ever since then, I've only used the holes. I get my feet like right up as high as I can. So like, I mean, I have a lot of mobility, so this might not be ideal for everybody. I get my feet right up as high as I can. So I'm really pushing into the wall and like holding. And I only can go one way because of a shoulder injury. So I have to always be reaching with my good arm. But ever since that technique, feet up nice and flat, only using the holes, reaching with my good arm, I have yet to fail the obstacle.
Nails
so
it.
That's Tyler.
I feel like for me, when I did that, and I'll do it again this weekend, maybe I'll go with that one, because now I feel a little bit more comfortable. I did the OS course. I've done it a couple times now, which is awesome. And I've also run enough races doing it that I feel a lot more comfortable. I think I'm going to try that, but that one requires a little bit more of a full send. Basically, like you have to kind of move it a little faster. So I think I was going a little tentative doing it that way, but I think that's going to be my go-to for the 10K this weekend. But what's yours then, Sandy?
So actually mine's very similar to Amber's. I find the speed in this case works really well. Legs definitely up, pushing into the wall is a big thing, because as soon as you lean in, you're going to slip down. Guaranteed. Doesn't matter what you do. I was a big one with the hole, but now that I've actually created my own Olympus wall, I notice I'm actually starting to use the chains a little bit more, which I never expected. But that was because I've had chance to practice more and more regularly. And all of a sudden, because the hole was like my comfort zone, I'm like, I could really grip. It gives me enough time to get those legs up, do the little hop. But now I'm starting to get a little bit more comfortable with the chains. So again, I think the more you do it, the more you kind of expand going, okay, maybe I should try something else, or maybe something else will work a little bit better. And I kind of ventured out of it. But again, that's a big part of what I do in the course is try different ways. The other big thing is, and you mentioned this, Amber, I've got a bum shoulder as well. And I always tell people, try both ways. Don't assume because everybody's going a certain way because of starting on this side, that this side will not work better, because it does make a difference, because you don't want to be overlapping your arms and getting caught up in your arms. So little things like that make a difference too. But the reality is, if you don't get to practice like you do in the course, you're never going to know that, because the day of the race, you get one shot at it, right? So I think that's why there's a high failure with that. So this is where the obstacle course really allows you to really practice and hammer that out, because how many people have an Olympus wall? Me, but the same. Most
but it's
people
not
don't,
the
right?
surface. I think the difference between having an Olympus wall, because I also have a few different walls that have chains and different holds and stuff, but the surface is so different, right? Spartan uses a surface And the reason I'm going to say without knowing, but knowing from a building standpoint, you'd use a surface like that so that you can travel with that piece of equipment over and over again. If you're just using wood and it's painted, after one race, 2 races, it's kind of done. So
Absolutely.
it's longevity that they're using it. And also at Spartan, they don't care whether or not it's hard for us or not. In fact,
Exactly. They want it hard.
they didn't mean to make it harder, but now they're happy about it.
Exactly.
So,
They're like, yes.
yeah.
The other big one I see too, and Jill, you saw this too, is the Z wall. The Z wall is still an issue for a lot of people, especially when you get on that corner one. Because they can't see what they're gripping, and especially if they're a little bit shorter, it does come into play, and people are just not comfortable. And you did this video, and I loved it when you did it, Jill. My feet are too big for this.
I hear this. I heard it today while with a kid, and I was like, my feet are twice the size of yours, but
so again, it's just those little hops. So again, I show little variations, but that corner is still catching a lot of people. So I do focus a lot on that during the course as well. And what works for one person may not for the other. But again, how many people have a Z wall? Again, I do, but that's one of the big things. And that's why I picked certain obstacles were the ones that I saw that were real pain for a lot of people. And then once they figure out what works for them, it's not that complicated, but it's figuring out the technique that's for you. That's the biggest issue.
And when you're racing, you're not like, anybody out there, you know that if you fail it, you've either got burpees or a penalty lap. So there's pressure there. So I liked the fact that you could just try all these different things like Olympus. I could just go for it. So I found that super helpful because there's no pressure there. Nobody cares if you're passing or failing. There are no burpees in the obstacle specialist course.
That's true.
Well, I could put some in there.
Can you just, as our obstacle specialist, can you just confirm, because I know there's a lot of people that are confused as to what you can touch, what you cannot touch.
Yes.
I do know like the verticals you can, but the horizontals you cannot. So if you could just maybe like confirm some of the rules and technicalities of the Z wall, just while we have you on here, if you can do that.
For sure. So when you start the Z wall, as soon as both your feet go up, you're committed. Okay, just same with the Olympus. Once your feet are off the ground, you're committed. So you're committed to that lane, you're committed to go. So you're right, Amber, you cannot touch the top of the first barrier at the top or the bottom. So you can only have your feet and hands on the blocks themselves. Okay. Now, to your point, the beams that actually do the Z part, you are allowed to use that. So those are basically the basic rules right there. How you hop from one thing to another, that's up to you. You could walk it, you could do sideways, you could, whatever the case, but it's just not touching in the top, not touching in the bottom. And that's the big thing. The other big thing, and I've experienced it as well, is pay attention to people around you, because guess what? There's people going on the other side as well. And sometimes because people are so excited, they don't always pay attention, and you could be hitting knees with the person across from you. So really pay attention to that, because that will throw you off. I actually had that where I literally had to stop and hold my blocks until the guy would move, because he wouldn't move and his knees were in the way. And I'm like, I can't budge until he moves forward. So I'm sitting there just clamping and waiting. So that's the other thing. You want to pay attention to your surroundings with that. And here's another thing, like any obstacle, because I've made this mistake before too. And I share some of my mistakes that I've done in the courses too, because you're always going to learn every time you do a race. So I like to share my, wow, I shouldn't have done that moments. Is don't jump for the bell, because unless you're a pro and you've done it a gazillion times, you might miss it. And guess what? You got to do burpees.
After all that would work.
Right? After all that work, because I did that silly move on the monkey bar, skipped the last bar going, it's right there. I could hit it. And I didn't.
So I do want to point out something, because you touched on it. Obstacle etiquette. And I feel like this is more common in age groups and elite. And I understand, like, open racers, you guys are probably new to the sport. Maybe it's your first time racing, but ultimately, like, you still want to have a good shot at the obstacles. So let's just talk about obstacle etiquette, because especially when you get into like the super and the beast, where you're getting monkey bars that are turning, you know, like that's the biggest thing. Like, just, I know you're racing for time, but let's talk about etiquette here. So Sandy, I'm gonna let you take the lead on this one.
Absolutely. I kind of touched upon it. Pay attention to your surroundings. So if there's like a big lineup and everything like that, like be courteous. Especially in the open heats, you're going to get people that are a little bit slower. They're learning and everything. And, they want to do it and they've worked so hard to try to do it. And they may want to do it a second time, which again, in the open heat, there's a little bit more flexibility there. But if there's a big lineup and you want to go again, make sure you go back in line and make it fair to everyone. That's probably the biggest thing. There's a little bit of flexibility. I mean, it's not encouraged, but I mean, the reality is people are going to do that, but be observant of what's going on. So if there's a big lineup, might not be the time to be doing that. And again, with elite, actually any level, is the thing that it still drives me nuts because I still see it. And I'm very mama bear. Because I often run with my team in the open heats, because my big motto is I do like basically a guided heat with my team. Last year I had 18 people with me for Blue Mountain. Awesome. And I always stay with that last person, because guess what? That last person is probably the one that needs me the most. Nobody finishes on their own. So I'm very protective of people, especially when they go on the cargo nets and that type of thing. So pure etiquette. If you know somebody's taking their time, there's a very good chance that person has a fear of heights. Give them the space. What's he going to do? You're not, and especially in an open heat, it's not about timing. You're not trying to break a record. But even if you are in an open heat, if you see somebody's having a bit of a hard time with something and they're most likely conquering a fear, scooch over one then. Don't push them. Don't pressure them. That is the worst thing you could do to someone. And guess what? They're going to shut down and they probably won't run again because of that experience. Don't be that person. Be courteous. Allow them. Remember what it was like when you first did something that you were petrified of. Give them that space. It's just common courtesy, common etiquette. Those are probably the things that I see the most. And don't hover, like give people space. Like when you're doing a spear throw, which we're going to talk about, spear throw, make sure you're giving people enough room to pull their cord and you're not like right there behind them. And then they have to worry about hitting them behind you. Again, give them their space to be able to do things. It's just common courtesy, right? Those are probably the things that I notice the most. Anything else that you guys wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I've seen a few times actually. The one that twists with the handles.
Yes. The twister.
Twister. Okay. The one that twists with the handle. Duh. I've seen it almost every time I race. And it just like everything in me wants to just tell people like, just pay attention, like be courteous.
Yeah.
Because like say I'm going, right? And when you go to reach for it, it's going to drop. I've seen 100 times where somebody goes to reach and somebody jumps on the bar behind them and it drops and they miss, and now you've totally messed up that person's run. At least wait until they're on the second set, because there is a transition.
Absolutely.
Right? And the worst part is there was other open lanes. So, I mean, in those scenarios whereby you going on the obstacle, and again, this is probably more in the age group where you're like a little bit more experienced, you are racing for time, but you also don't want to sabotage someone's race here. Exactly. So like those ones, I've seen it multiple times. So I would just say like, at least wait until the person's on the second transition, or just pick a different lane. Like don't intentionally like sabotage someone's obstacle.
Yeah.
Well, no, you nailed it. I've seen that multiple times too.
And sometimes people don't know they're doing that. So now that you've heard, now you know, wait till the person gets there. Because they're running their race. Although I did find, because I normally run age group, when I ran open this year, it was the opposite. People were just totally cheering for the last person. My daughter and her friend went as well, and they had a great time. And my daughter went so slow on the monkey bars. Like the grip was, it was too slow. I don't know how she hung on for so long, but she got to about a third. It was crazy. Like I probably would have jumped down by that point. And I think just because the Spartan bars are a lot thicker than you're used to. So you're just not used to that. she got about halfway, I'd say, and then people just started cheering for her, and that just made her keep going, and she ended up ringing the bell. So when you're in open, you do find a lot of people that are there just to really cheer for each other. Like it's so much of a different vibe there. I find you're going to see more of that twister stuff in age group and maybe elite, because people are just trying to go so fast, right?
Absolutely.
So that's more for us age groupers.
I feel like this is a good time to ask the question, and maybe this is off topic, but Sandy, like, when would you recommend somebody move out of open and into age group? Because I feel like there's a lot of hesitation and people just don't know if or when. So you, as our specialist, like, what would you recommend for someone considering if or when?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's something because, what I specialize in is more really getting the newbies out there and getting people to do something that they didn't think they could do. So that's really what my goal is. Could I do age group? Probably. But I would say when you could run a clean race and you've basically pretty much nailed all the obstacle, you should be going into age group. I think that would be, or almost nailed everything, because it might be that little push that you need to really kind of bring it to that next level. And you're right, there is a lot of hesitation. And because all of a sudden they're like, well, what about the burpees? What about the penalty? And things have changed so much in the last few years, right, girls? I can't even keep track of them sometimes. Every time I do this course, I revisit just in case they've changed something else. But again, they do try to consider some of the feedback. Sometimes it's taken, sometimes it's not. It's really hard. People have to understand this is a large organization. What may work in one market may not in another. So it's a tough call to decide, what changes, but it's also very intimidating to people. So I get that. But I mean, if you think you're solid and you've run a clean race, why not give it a shot? Even if you do it with somebody else, do it with one other person. That way you've got your personal cheerleader. Maybe that's all it takes. It's just that one person to be there with you, not to coach you, because you're not allowed to do that while you're in age group or elite. Nobody can coach you, but they could be there to cheer you on, right? Mm-hmm. So I would say that would be what I would do as a rule of thumb, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't think of any other way of kind of deciding. A lot of it is confidence, right? So doing even a course, doing one of these courses, maybe that doing the course is going to teach you that 1, 2, 3 things that maybe is making a difference between you not being able to get that obstacle and all of a sudden you're able to do it. And then you're like, oh my gosh, this is what's been stopping me from going into age group. Why didn't I do that sooner? That's the kind of stories I want to hear. That's the kind of stuff. That's what I'm saying. This course is not just for the newbies. It might be that person that's ready to do that next move, but there's 1 or 2 obstacles that's stopping them. Why not do the course, build that confidence, get a little practice in, and go for it? What's the worst that happens? You do 30 burpees.
Well, and the other thing too is that if you run in the age group category, that you get the best heats if you like running in the morning. So there's another incentive. You're also, if you're kind of competitive, then it allows you to kind of base, yourself on somebody else, which sometimes we need that body doubling. That's important. I know I'm super competitive. I don't care if I win or lose. It's not that. I just want to try and push myself against somebody else that's running faster than me basically every time. So if you're that person too, right?
Yeah, it gets the adrenaline going, right? Because there's nothing like, oh my gosh, that person's about the same as me. They've just done the same thing. If they could do it, I should be able to do it too. And it drives you, right? So it brings in, it builds that confidence there too. Totally agree.
And a lot of times, because I am a stats person and a numbers person, I will go and look at the numbers in elite, in age group, in open. There are open racers in there all the time, beating even elites. You see that. And men, women, different age. It's not one type of person. It's like, it could be anyone. So that could be you.
And here's the other thing too, because I mentioned that I had a 64-year-old in my course. Age is just a number. Like I got into obstacle racing late, right? Because this didn't exist in my 20s, even my 30s. It was like, it just wasn't around. Age is just a number, because I've got a lot of people that are not the typical body type, or they're a certain age and they're killing it on this stuff, right? They're doing it because they enjoy it. And don't let the age fool you. We could kick butt.
Yeah, and
right?
there are age
We
groups
could do a lot.
65
I could do every
plus.
single obstacle.
Yeah, there you
Right.
go. And 65 plus is the last one. But I actually personally, and this might be just me personally talking, my dad is going to race this year he's done Tough Mudder and stuff in his 60s, but taking a little break. And he wants to come back and do Spartan this year in Collingwood, and he's 72. So I feel like we should bump up the age group a little bit, like
That's awesome.
give him a chance to get a podium medal,
There we go.
Dad.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
I love it.
He keeps talking about it. He in his 60s, he did quite well. And actually, another little funny story, since sometimes we talk funny stories. We were doing another race and it was competitive, and he at that point in his 60s could run as fast as me. Not that I'm the fastest runner in the world or anything, but I was in my 30s, and he was running fast. He saw me go off course. He was behind me. He saw me and just let me go because he wanted to beat me.
I love it.
And
I love that.
I wasn't even mad. I was like, I would have done that too. And there's where I got that. So
you learned from the best, Jill.
Yeah, anyways, back to not talking silly personal stories, but
oh, I love that.
The other big one is
I do want to ask.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I do want to ask one more thing.
Mm-hmm.
We can go to the spear throw. This we can come back to it, but this is also, if you sign up for the obstacle specialist course, is a great preview, if I'm not mistaken, to the course that weekend. So, as an age group racer, even just getting out there and seeing the course, like say you're going for podium, and you're like, you're not sure, where to make a move, where you're going to make that move, right? This is like a course preview. This is like your inside scoop, you guys. Like if you're part of the Canadian series, it would be strategic to get out there on the course. I know this weekend is not part of the series, but like in future races, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And I have had a few people, that's exactly what their motive was. Don't get me wrong, they did learn stuff. Now, here's the thing too, even though I'm the teacher, I also learn from the students because they may do something slightly different. And I'm like, ooh, right, Joe? Remember we did that last time? I'm like, oh, I'm going to steal that trick. We're like, don't tell anyone. But it's just one of those things, like you're always learning, right? And it is very strategic. It's also a great way of figuring out the terrain. Because, if it's been raining, which is supposed to rain on the Thursday and the Saturday, it also kind of gives you a good idea okay, I'm going to have to slow down here because the terrain's a little rough. Where can I make up some time? Now, keep in mind, though, when I'm doing the obstacle course, we're not running this stuff, right? We're focusing more on the obstacles and stuff. You don't want to be gassing out. You don't want to be wearing out your legs, running up those hills and, running down those hills. That's not the goal. I'm not saying we're not going to do no running, but that's not the goal of the course, right? Because most people are going to be running both days in a lot of cases. So that you won't be testing that part out. But it's more about figuring out the terrain and figuring out, what did they change on the obstacle? For example, did they change the spear throw with that new setup? That kind of stuff. So it also gives you an idea of how things are set up. Absolutely, Amber. That is very strategic. And there's a great way of taking advantage of it. Why not? And you get a free race too. So when you purchase the course, you get a free race as well. So
it's kind of a no-brainer.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, no-brainer, really, when you think about it.
Yeah, right?
That's awesome. Yeah, so basically you get out there, you get to play on all the obstacles, what Spartan racer doesn't want to just go play on obstacles? For how long is it? Is it a couple hours, or is it kind of just like not set because you're out there till you're done? Like, what's the timeline look like on that?
No, great question. And I always have people, and I actually have 3 emails just today saying, what's the expected end time? It really depends. Like, for example, Blue Mountain takes a lot longer because the obstacles are really spread out, and it's just the way it's set up compared to some of the other obstacles. So it really depends on the venue, because if you only build obstacles in certain areas, that actually works in my favor. So if you looked at the map, A lot of them are concentrated in one area. That means I could get through a lot more obstacles a lot quicker than I usually would. So that may mean I'm done a little bit earlier. But typically I've gone anywhere from 1 in the afternoon to 3 in the afternoon. Like when we did Blue Mountain, we could have easily have gone till 5 just because
I can see that.
how it was set up, right? But the way I was looking at the map right now, it looked pretty concentrated with a few to the side and then some in Timbuktu. We'll see about those. But that's where I always say, team, okay, here's where we're at. Here's the time. Do we want to go out just for those 2 obstacles? How important are they to you? And then we make a decision. So we kind of play it by ear by that, but usually like, I'd say 2-ish. So we start at 9 in the morning and then, kind of go from there. But it really depends on the venue, to be honest.
That's so fun. I want to do it just so I can go hang out and play on obstacles for 5 hours.
Exactly. It's fun. Now, with that being said, though,
with them in your backyard like the 2 of you. So.
Yeah, we're a little spoiled, right, Jill? The other thing, though, too, I always tell people, like, I'm not a big glove wearer, but there are certain things that when I'm teaching, I do use the gloves. Because it is wear and tear, especially if you're going to be racing like 2 races after doing the course. So sometimes I do tell people, bring the gloves with you just to protect your hands, because we did a lot. And because it was the first Brimacombe, it was the first one of the season. So the calluses weren't quite as hard as they are now. And I tore a big, nice chunk of skin off my one hand. So there's things that you do want to kind of keep in mind when you are doing the course. You want to practice, but you also have to listen to your body and pay attention to your hands, especially, making sure that you're wearing the same kind of attire you would when you're racing. For example, if you're going to wear shorts, make sure you wear those long socks so you don't get those burns, just like you would with a race, right? So any of the rules that you would use for race day, you should also be doing that when you're doing the course as well, because the last thing you want to do is wreck something right before a race. So I always tell people, tone it down a little bit. It's not about time. It's not about this. It's about working on form and technique, working smarter, not harder. And you'll hear me say that a gazillion times throughout the day, because that's really the goal of the course, right? Is making better at everything that you're doing, but really paying attention to what you're wearing, what you eat, so on. Same as what you would do on race day.
Because it is long and potentially in the sun too, right? So
exactly
treat it like a race, but like a chill race.
Yes, definitely hats. Highly recommended. People that did not wear a hat on the last course we did really regretted it. They're like, wow, that was a lot of sun, because Brimacombe didn't have a lot of shade. And a lot of these venues don't have a lot of shade. So be prepared, have a hat, extra, whatever you would do on race day, same thing.
That's awesome. And you were going to say something about the spear throw. And I know the spear throw has been so controversial over the last few years. I love the spear throw. I think they're very strategic about where they place it in the race, where you're pretty much fatigued. Your level of concentration is probably not at its prime. Your strength and your grip strength has definitely taken a toll. You're tired. Like if you've just done the beast last year in Blue Mountain, they had at the very end, like, I do believe that the spear throw is a great example of athleticism. And I know there's a lot of controversy on that one, but I believe like it does take precision, coordination, strength, concentration. And at the end of a race, all those things are compromised. So let's talk about that spear throw for a minute, Sandy.
Absolutely. Everything you said, bang on. So first thing I always tell people, observe people before you, because there's always going to be slight differences with the setup, right? They try to make it all even, but they're all slightly different. Pay attention to the spear. Some are a little bit more warp, just little things like that. So, and you guys have all seen me in action. I observe a lot. All those years of working HR, studying people, it's just, that's what I do. I pick up on those little things. Pay attention to the people in front of you. How many people are hitting certain targets and nailing it? How many, is there consistency? Is there a spear, look at the spear before you actually commit to that one. Does it feel right? Does it feel weighted? Because they're all just, there's little differences. Some are newer, some are older, because they're changing it up all the time. even the target might be different. So I know at the last race, it was the newer one, which is what I'm training my folks on at my home gym with the new one, knowing it was coming. But I know some of them, the locations won't have the new one. But again, pay attention to that. I always share this story every time when I do the course. The first time, my first ever Spartan race, did the rope, did everything properly, made sure it wasn't tangled. But little did I know, my foot was on that rope. I had
Zach did that one year.
I had a perfect bullseye. It was going right through the middle. Sharon, one of my coaches, was there. She was my witness. And it was perfect. And it pulled back that much because my foot was on the rope. So the first thing I tell people, make sure you pay attention to where your rope is. Make sure it's untangled. Make sure it's at the front of that barrier, and pay attention to where your foot is, because that'll make you or break you. And it was so fun. Even the guy that was there, I'm not going to say what word he said, but he goes, I couldn't believe that happened. It was close. So freaky. Like, it was perfect bullseye. I was like jumping. Yeah. Boom. And it pulls back. So so everything you said, Amber, of, your balance, how high to put it up, how you're going to hold it, all of that. A lot of people fail at this because they can't practice. Where can you throw a spear, safely without hurting anyone, right? So,
or without looking like a total psycho now walking down the road with a spear.
Exactly. Can you imagine? See, I keep it in the forest so nobody sees how psycho I am. But basically, that's what it is. That's why there's a high failure rate, because you get one shot at it. Most people don't get to practice. People get very frustrated with it. And the thing is, what works for you, Amber, may not work for me. What works for Jill may not work for me. Or I may do exactly like what Jill does, and it's bang on for me. So I try to show various ways of going higher up, holding a different grip, getting power behind it, focusing more on getting it straight, always doing the elbow to hand where you're doing like a dart, not like you're throwing a ball, all these little tricks that I show. And then the problem is, you got to figure out what works for you, right? So you got to have to try a lot of different things to figure that out. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't have that opportunity. That's why it's such a high failure rate. And I could hit that target, 9 out of 10 times, but race day, you never know.
That's
right?
me.
And
that is me. I can hit my target
like from the back.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have the wingspan for that, but yeah, you really see all kinds of techniques on that.
I've tried a cool technique at my house, because I'd never try this at a race. Well, maybe I would just for fun, but not in an age group race, but where you hold, for anyone listening, you basically hold it in front of you, and then you kind of use your hips and your arms to throw it in front of you. So your hands are not behind, they're in front of you, and I can get it in. You have to throw it up, and it's how it kind of balances and tips in. But yeah, I can.
And I've tried that, and I can't nail it that way.
Yeah, it's really weird. It's like a balance.
I'll give it a shot.
Well, I'm going to be completely honest. I can nail pretty much every other obstacle, except I think I'm like 2 or 3 out of 7 on my spear throw this year.
Come see me, Amber.
I run every beast I do, I run a perfect race. Every beast. I have yet to fail the spear throw in a beast. That's it. But like, for some reason, and I don't know, maybe if I'm just going too, like I said, too fast, you're not concentrating.
That's probably it.
Yeah. So that damn spear throw. I mean, we've all had it.
I mean, we've seen elites lose races from it, right?
Yeah.
I lost podium because of it in Jacksonville. Yeah.
And I hear that all the time. And it's just one of those things. You can practice. You never know what's going to happen the day of. It's just one of those.
Nothing in the world feels better. Nothing feels better.
Even like when you're an age group racer, right? And if you're running a tight race like I had in Jacksonville, and there's, you're all lined up together, the top 3 fighting for podium, you're rushing, right? Yeah. Like, so then there's that level of like urgency, which that was my own mistake, right? Sometimes, but you live and learn. But yeah, there's also, you add that into it, right? You're racing. So you're trying to stay urgent almost. And there's a lot that goes into that spear throw that I feel like is underrated. And people just choose not to like it.
It looks so easy for the ones that get it, but it's not.
Yes, I agree.
I have a question
So,
for you, Sandy, about the box.
Yes.
As long as you guys are okay switching the spear talk,
Yeah.
Yep.
we'll do a whole episode on that one. But the box, I had a few different techniques. I've done it a few different ways. I can do it the hard way for me, which is basically climbing it like a rope, but it's
Yeah.
really awkward because you're at the side of it.
It is.
And then launching my hand over, grabbing it, and using my legs to get over because I'm pretty flexible. That works for me. But I also saw a technique which I've been using and then double checked it in the rules. And as far as I can tell, it is okay. But then at the last age group race that I did, I was told that it was not okay. So then I believe I went and double checked it with you, but let me explain the technique. Basically, it is on the rope. You tie a knot in the rope and you put your foot in that rope and then you climb it. It just gives you a little bit more leverage. And then you haul your hands over and your legs over and basically, yeah. So is that legal? Do we know? Or
There's nothing in the rules saying that it's not. Because the other thing that, right? And there's nothing in there. So what I will do though is double check with Nick. But when I looked in the rules, because I went and looked and I have never heard anything saying that that was not allowed. There's nothing in there saying you cannot do that. Yes. So if it doesn't say you cannot do it, how do you argue saying it's against the rules, right? But I will check again. The other thing that and this was the one that we kind of got a little sneak peek from one of the participants in one of the other races, just looping the rope and kind of holding it at the top.
Yes.
And you're using that rope basically to kind of loop your foot in and go up. There's nothing in the rules saying you can't do that either. So there's nothing saying you can't manipulate the rope in any way that I could see. I looked and I checked again and I'm like, there's nothing in there saying you can't. But again, it takes somebody doing it once and then all of a sudden it might be a rule change. But from what I see, nothing's changed in the rule book. But I will come back at you if I see anything different or if I hear anything differently.
Awesome. And we'll update everyone. And the reason I asked too is because a lot of people that I know that do multiple races, they use that technique as well. So it's not like I did not invent it. I actually saw someone else doing it, how I learn everything. And so, but the technique that you just explained where you hold the top of the rope, that would maybe be more, it would be less rule breaky if it was rule breaky, but definitely.
But it's still making the most out of the rope, right? So, but from what I saw, there was nothing on there. But again, as we know, as things occur, sometimes they update things because they didn't think about, maybe people would do that. Who knows? It may change. And that's why every time I teach the course, I always go back in and make sure nothing's been changed, because sometimes they'll amend things and they don't always tell us, right? Or I may not have made one of those SGX courses or calls. We've got monthly calls just like the ambassadors do. And, we go over any changes or anything that we should be aware of. And I haven't heard anything in the last little bit. So of any changes like that.
Unless I get told, I'm going to use that one again. So if you see me out there, it's just because I believe the rules are that way. But if I get told, I definitely will. I never want to do well or do a race where I'm cheating. So
absolutely. So also I will reconfirm again. So stay tuned, everyone. If we hear differently, we'll make sure to update you.
Yeah. But at the same time, I say that I will take every legal, strategic shortcuts. And that doesn't mean I'm going to go off trail. I mean, legal thing. Like if you're running, if we have to make a big 90-degree turn, I'm going to run on an angle there to cut some distance down. So I'm always looking for
harder, not harder.
So I'm always looking for any little advantage that I can get, because that's what makes this fun for me is seeing how well I can do the things. And I'm sure that's for everyone who races multiple times or multiple days. It's like, how can I do this better, make this more fun, get faster, that kind of thing. And
exactly.
Yeah. Well, this has been.
But the biggest thing is cheer people on. You have no idea how much of a difference that makes for people, especially when you see somebody like freezing, especially with the heights. Be that voice. You have no idea how much of a difference that makes for them. It could be that difference of them giving up and doing more of these races. So we get in our mode. We get especially in the open heats, especially, be that voice, be that encouraging voice. It really goes a long way for people. It builds their confidence, and who knows, down the road, that could be somebody that's going to be in an age group, and you could be part of that difference of why they built that confidence to be able to take that step, right? So encourage people, be supportive, be helpful. Again, in the open heat, you're able to coach obviously with your age group and your elite. You're not allowed to, but I'm always coaching on the spot in the open heats. Like, I can't help it. It's like the coaching hat stays
Just
on.
natural.
And then all of a sudden I see everybody doing the technique and everybody's nailing it. It's awesome. I love it.
Because at the end of the day, it's for getting more racers and getting more people to feel like they're part of the community, and like just share this fitness journey with everyone that will also join us and drink the Kool-Aid. So
exactly. We love the Kool-Aid.
And you know what? I feel like there's so many racers out there who are also trainers and coaches and gym owners. And I see it all the time in the open heats. Like, you don't need to be scared that you're not going to get help out there on the obstacles, but doing a course like this will definitely make you more confident going into your first race or even your 20th race. Like, if that's, if the obstacles are not your strength, then I hope we've shared with you guys some good tidbits tonight, and maybe intrigued you to get out there and spend a few hours with Sandy. So it'll be happening this weekend on Friday leading into Calabogie. What other dates do you have up and coming where people could jump into this if Friday is not available to them?
So the next one and the last one will be at Blue Mountain. So it will also be the Friday before the races. So again, we get the obstacles when they're nice and fresh, where the caution tape is still on. We're the first ones to go on. So yes, the next one will be Blue Mountain. And that usually is the one that's most popular because it's the most populated area out of all the races. So that one there gets pretty busy. So don't sit on it, get on that as soon as possible for sure. Because we do cap to a certain amount of people. And, I'd love to see more and more people come out. So definitely Blue Mountain. And if there's ever one that you want to be strategic about, that is the race for sure. Because the trains are always challenging, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what about Kelowna? Who's the instructor out in Kelowna? Let's give her a shout
out. So Stacey Rose will be teaching the one in Kelowna. Thank you. I forgot about that one because I was thinking East Coast. So yes, there will be a course on that too. Always the Friday before the event. So same thing, same concept, doing the same, teaching as many obstacles as you can. You're in great hands. Stacey and I have been the ones that have been doing it for this is the third season now. So yeah, you're going to be in great hands with Stacey as well.
That's amazing. Awesome. So if anybody wanted to connect with you, where can they find you on social media, Sandy?
So for Instagram, it's Sandy Ostler So Fitness. And then that's probably the easiest one out of that. I'm also on Facebook under So Fitness. If you look that up, I'm based out of Georgetown, Ontario. And you can actually look me up that way. Also with my website, sofitness.ca. You can also reach me that way. So I'm usually really quick at getting back to people. If I don't, it's probably because I'm going to be traveling tomorrow. But I will get back to you as soon as possible. But yes, we've got, a good amount of people tomorrow, but I'm hoping after this, we'll have even more joining us for Friday. If not, Blue Mountain. Otherwise, if you're out west, Kelowna with Stacey.
And so if somebody wants to register for the race, do they do that directly on Spartan.com? Where do they find the registration for the course? Or not the race, I said the race. Registration for the course.
So with the course, if you go under the Spartan, either .ca or .com, if you actually go into the training, that's where they'll actually have the links there to actually join up for the courses. And then you'll actually see it by the event, and it'll just walk you right through there.
Awesome. And when do they close registration? Is it open until the day before, or is it just open until it's full? Like, could they show up that day and if it's available, register? Or
I believe they do it till the night before, but they might even keep it the morning of. But usually it's the night before. So I would say Thursday night, I wouldn't sit on it for too long. Do it as early as possible tomorrow to make sure that you don't miss any cutoff, because, they'll send me a roster list. They'll send the certificates, all of that stuff. So they do have to have a cutoff, but they do try to do it as long as possible. End of day Thursday for sure would be your best bet to make sure that you don't miss out.
Awesome. Was there anything else you wanted to ask, Jill, before we tune off here, or?
And no, just to say this was really fun to do this, and I'm looking forward to seeing you out on the course this weekend.
Absolutely. It's going to be awesome. So thank you so much, ladies, for having me on this. This is great. This is all about the community. I think this is a great tool for people to learn a little bit more about the people behind the scenes. And thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, and thank you, Sandy, for your expertise and your time. And we wish you the best, most amount of fun on Friday with your crew. Heading out to California is one of my all-time favorites. So have fun, you guys. And to our listeners, stay tuned. We'll chat with you guys soon.
Bye, everyone.